Good evening, dear ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure to be once again with you this evening. And good enough, today mark the midterm during our 2 working weeks of 12 batch of masterclass. We are really happy that from day one till today, you have shown yourself up to the task by being present and by taking good notes. Have always appreciated the presence of each trainer. Each trainer with its speciality and with experience. Now, since today is the midterm break, we want to give you something very important. Our gift is a gift in nature, and this is one way you can remember us after the masterclass is over. Because we hold you so dear, we always have in mind to offer you the best. Then in our team, our trainers team, have people of various experience. And nevertheless, one is unique, quite unique, in the sense that his year of experiences, his year of practical step have surpasses many decades. And we are really happy to have him among us. If you have your agenda, you will notice that today we want to deal with course 107, which is a very practical course. Well, as you are focused, as you try yourself to be at your utmost position, we kindly welcome you once again, and at the same time ask you to take necessary measure not to miss this class. Not only miss, but take the necessary measure to benefit fully, because the information that will be passed on here are valuable, not only because of the masterclass, but on your daily life. You have among our midst one of the experts in its domain. As I was saying earlier, he has accumulated many decades of experiences in such matter. Oh, sorry that he was knocked from inside the room. He was there long before me now. Okay, let me admit him. Okay, so his year of experiences in practicing fire prevention have surpasses many. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting much time, let us welcome among us John Flynn. John Flynn will introduce himself. I kindly leave him the honor to introduce himself so that you can hear from him. I believe that at the end of the class, you're going to be really amazed and you're going to be grateful. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome all together the day's trainer in the person of John. So, John, you are welcome. You have the floor.
Oshe Daluna Gode. Happy to be here. Happy to be here. Okay, so you just want me to start and go straight into the whole thing?
Yeah, I would like you to present.
I'll tell you a little bit about me first of all. I spent, well, my first career, I'm quite an old man, by the way. My first career, I was a scientist and I traveled the world. I've worked with NASA. I've worked with quite a few other places as well. And I kind of got a bit bored with that. So I went into other fields, consulting on all the international standards like quality, environment, health and safety, business continuity, information security, all kinds of things like that, and a number of other very specific standards. This has taken me all around the world. So I have worked in 26 countries across 5 continents. And I can say that I'm an Irishman. My home is in Ireland. I love Ireland more than anywhere else in the world. But my second favorite country is Niger. I've been going to Nigeria for about 22 years now, and sometimes 12 or 13 trips in one year. Some of those trips could be 3, 4, 5 weeks long. and really got to like Nigeria, did quite a lot of work in Nigeria. I have quite a number of names. The Yoruba call me Ayo, except when I'm in Ibadan, when they call me Adisa. The Ekweri call me Priye. The Igbo call me Emeka. And everybody tends to call me Kolo Igbo. So Crazy White Man, which is my favorite name of them all. Or Babo Nigba, which is what the Yoruba sometimes call me. So I really enjoyed Nigeria, and I've done quite a lot of health and safety work there. And that's one of the reasons why I became involved with OSHA, just because of my love of Nigeria and my love of the of health and safety there. I'm married to a Nigerian girl who has completed her immigration and is actually now joining me in Ireland in about, let me see, 4 days' time. Well, 3.5 now. So she's joining me next Tuesday. So I'm going to be a very happy Awibo when that happens. Now, before we kind of begin talking about fire safety and such, I'd like to stress the seriousness of this, and I can think of no better way of doing that than to show you 2 very short videos. The first one, we have a tradition in this country at Christmas of putting up a Christmas tree. So, Leon, can you show us the Christmas tree video at this point?
3, 2, 1, 0.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes, please. A minute.
And if people can still hear me while that's going on. Okay. Now just notice the little timer at the bottom. It's 1 minute long, this video, and there's our little Christmas tree. Keep watching the bottom of the Christmas tree. You'll see there's a little fire, tiny little fire. Not so tiny now, within about 5 or 6 seconds. Look at that black toxic smoke. If you were in that smoke and you tried to inhale, it would be burning your throat, burning your lungs, burning your nose. You couldn't see, it would sting your eyes. In fact, if you're not out of that room now, you're probably not finding your way out, even if it's your house and you know it well, and you're probably going to die. Okay, thank you. The key thing that I want us all to take away from watching that video was the speed, the incredible speed. There we are at the very start of it. We're sitting in a typical room in any house, in any country. Really doesn't matter what country it is. And it doesn't have to be a Christmas tree. It could be any electrical appliance in any room. Nigeria, America, China, anywhere. And we see that incredible speed. And it has gone from a place where you should feel safe. We all have a right to feel safe in our home. And we're going from somewhere like that. Look at the furniture burning. Everything else catching flames. One of the key things, well, the key thing is that speed. You had to get out of that room as quickly as you possibly could. Within 1 minute, it's a death trap. So, very important that you realize that fire, the speed of it is incredible. Until you've been involved with it, until you've experienced it for yourself, you won't really appreciate it. Even if your mind says, yes, I know it's fast, you really just can't believe it, even when you see it for yourself. We're going to see that speed, and we're going to see that black, filthy, toxic smoke on more than one occasion. In fact, we're going to see it again in our next video. So if you could play the next video, please, Leon. And this is for all the football fans there. And this is about a disaster in a football club over in England. And there we have a football game going on, everybody packed into the stands watching, everybody having a good time, all enjoying themselves. I'm not a football fan myself, but I know many people are. I have a friend in Nigeria. He says, if you cut me, I will beat blue, because he's a Chelsea fan. I don't know who's playing here. Now, you see that stand we're looking at? In a moment or two, we're going to start looking at the right-hand side of that stand, your right-hand side. And you'll see something there. So at the minute, everybody's still enjoying themselves, not a care in the world. And we're going to see how that changes, and we're going to see how... Now look, there's something happening in that stand over there. It wasn't much. Most people didn't notice it. Most people don't even think there's a problem. Already there is a very severe problem here. And the TV people are still following the match. That's their job. People at home watching on their TV want to see the match. They want to enjoy it. They want to see where's the ball going, who has possession of the ball, who's going to try for a goal. But something else is wrong. I noticed the policemen in the back are looking at something. What are they looking at? They're not looking at that match. Most of the people, though, they're watching the match, enjoying the match. Eye on the ball, keep your eye on the ball, and then all of a sudden, let's see what happens. Now, look at that. Did you notice a little bit of black smoke? Little bit of black smoke in one of the stands. Now, what actually happens is these stands are kind of just layered, and people sit on the layer and walk on the layer. And sometimes people would smoke, and they would also eat. Look at that black smoke now. You can see it rising up there, and people are beginning to realize there's a fire, and the fire is beneath the stands. And that happened because people would drop rubbish beneath the stand. It wasn't easy to get the rubbish cleared away. And then somebody was smoking, threw down a cigarette, and it set fire to the rubbish. And you see, at the minute it looks quite small. It's just a few benches, about 4 or 5 benches, maybe only 8 feet wide. So quite a reasonably small fire. The other thing is, these stands are made of wood. Already, look at that amount of smoke. And at the minute it seems to be whitish smoke, but you can see it's getting darker by the moment as other materials, it's not just wood burning, there's other materials burning as well, more toxic materials.
And the smoke is now engulfing the pitch of one end. As that blaze grows,
So you can see already people are now, forget about the football match, that's not happening, nobody's worried about that anymore.
the floodlights, they were blown over, and now the stand may well be burning down.
And already I can tell you the fire brigade will have been on its way. In a big city in the UK like that, in a central metropolitan area, you will find that fire brigade response time is less than 7 minutes. However, that 7 minutes is now much too late to save that stand. Look at those flames, look at that smoke. Look at this. Here's a guy, and look, his clothes are smouldering. And the police are grabbing him and dragging away. They're afraid that stand will collapse onto people that are nearby. So and there's some idiot jumping about. They think it's great fun. They don't realize that lives could be lost here.
They came to celebrate the club's promotion to the second division for the first time in 50 years, and now they're running for their lives. The players are having to leave the pitch.
Right, they're taking the players out of the stadium. Forget about any football. That's just not going to happen anymore. And the fire has spread along from one tiny little section. It's now over half the stand. Even if the fire brigade were there and completely set up now, they could not save that stand. What they do is strategy is to stop the fire spreading to other buildings. That stand is gone. It's lost. Nothing. You're not putting that out. It's finished. Now, there's also an incredible amount of heat. Look at that policeman with his head on fire. Because of the heat, there's air currents. The air currents carry bits of burning debris. And that's another way that the fire spreads. This policeman here, he's trying to drag him away. Look at where he's holding his helmet. He's trying to shield his face from the incredible heat. You don't just walk up beside that, you know. Much too warm.
They've been talking about having a new ground at Valley Parade. They might have to have one. Because this is the day that Valley Parade Football Club...
Now, everybody in that city for miles around realises there's a big problem. You can see that column of smoke in the air. Last time I saw something like that was when the LG warehouse in Apapa went up in flames. And I could look out from Marina. I was in Marina at the time, and I could see that rising up above the city.
Hopefully now, as I look across the ground, everybody is out. The police have done a manful job because the rafters have been coming down on them, and you can see the exhaustion and the panic on the faces of some of those people there.
People holding up coats to try and shield their faces from the heat.
And look at that! Oh, the poor man. Oh, this is awful. The police desperately trying to save the life of a supporter. He's come to watch the football. This is human tragedy.
There's a guy on fire.
We were looking at a football game.
If your clothes ever catch fire, do not stand upright, or the flames will travel up. Your entire body will go up in flames. What you have to do is to lie down flat and roll over to smother the flames. That's the other thing they're doing with their coats. They're using it to smother the fire. We'll talk about smothering fire very shortly. So you can see the fire brigade aren't even there. And how long was that video? That video was maybe 4 minutes long or something like that. Already, in those 4 minutes, that massive building, that football stand that you could put thousands of people in, it's gone completely. Interestingly enough, please note that the smoke in this case is rising up because it's in the open. When it's in the open, the smoke can rise up. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now and we'll start the little slide presentation. Okay, so here we are. Now, let's just try and put a few things in context here. Without getting too exact, the UK has a population of about 65 to 70 million people, roughly. Nigeria, and I know there's big disputes about the population of Nigeria, but let's just say that there's about 3 times as many Nigerians, around let's say around 210 million Nigerians. So there's about 3 times more people in Nigeria than in the UK. So whatever figures I say, you can simply multiply them by 3 to get an idea. If everything else was equal, if Nigeria and the UK were exactly the same, apart from the size, then whatever figures I tell you from the UK, it would be 3 times that in Nigeria. So, of course, Nigeria and the UK are not exactly the same. Some things each country is better at than the other. And that might mean that you would have more of something or less of something, more than the size would make you think. But in the UK, there are about 35,000 fires every single year. And there are, of course, more, but I'm talking 35,000 that are serious enough to involve the fire brigade coming along. So that would work out at about, well, roughly 100,000 serious fires in Nigeria that would or should involve the fire brigade if you have one in your area. These lead to about 30 fatalities in the UK and about 2,500 injuries every year. Of course, all you need is one major incident and the death toll can go up massively. We would have Bradford City Football Stadium fire was way back in 1985. There you are now. That's about what, nearly 37 years ago. We've got King's Cross Underground fire, which there were some fatalities about. And the difference there was that it's underground. So all that big, horrible black smoke that you saw at the Bradford City fire, that could go up into the air and escape. So if you were standing maybe 100 yards away, you were okay because all the smoke was going up. You weren't really getting it. You could probably smell it, but it wasn't going to choke you, wasn't going to blind you or anything like that. Certainly wasn't going to burn your lungs. But once you're underground, that fire can be quite some distance away from you, but the tunnel fills with smoke. And then you begin to suffocate. And in fact, many of the people who were killed in the King's Cross Underground fire were suffocated. Not burned, suffocated. We have Buncefield Fuel Storage Depot. That was an interesting one. It was a Sunday, which was why the loss of life was very, very low indeed. I'm not even sure if there was any fatalities, but they were filling up on a Sunday. They came to fill up a big fuel storage container, and it was meant to automatically shut off. Whenever it was full, click, turn the switch, don't pump any more fuel. I'm full, can't take any more. But the switch didn't work. It didn't sense that it was full. So the pump kept running. They kept pumping fuel in. So of course the fuel has to go somewhere. It overflowed. Once it overflowed, sooner or later, it got a source of ignition. We'll have to talk about sources of ignition also. And wham, the whole thing went up. It actually caused the largest fire, the largest peacetime fire in Western Europe since the Second World War. And you could even see from space, from satellites, you could see a big plume of black smoke stretching from Buncefield, and the wind was blowing towards the west at this time. It was stretching west across the whole country. The Grenfell Tower block in 2017 was a terrible tragedy. And the problem was it's a big block of flats rising straight up. I can't remember the exact number of stories in it, 1, 2, 3, 4, well over 10 or so, well over 10. And that causes its own problems in evacuations and in fighting the fire. In fact, once you go above a certain height, it's very, very difficult for the fire brigade, even if they're there. How do they actually reach the fire to fight the fire? And it was the cladding on the outside of the tower block. Wasn't properly fireproof. It was flammable, and wham, the whole block went up in flames. And sometimes evacuating people can be dangerous. They panic, they run, they fall downstairs and break their neck. One guy trips, a lot of people walk over him, he gets crushed, or else there's a whole lot of, when a crowd moves, when a crowd panics, people can die. So sometimes they'll say, no, you're safe where you are. Let the fire brigade come and rescue you. They did that with Grenfell Tower block, and a lot of people were told to stay in their flat, and they stayed there, and basically the fire got them and they were killed. And then of course we had Notre Dame, one of the most famous cathedrals in the whole world, one of the most notable churches in the whole world, comparable with things like the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. So one guy was working on with a power tool, set it down, didn't turn it off, went away for an hour or so, and wham, there was some fault with it. Small fire, got out of control and burnt one of the most historic buildings in Europe. So fire can be very, very serious. So I'm going to see if I can move on here. Oh, this always gives me trouble moving on. There we go. Brilliant. Okay. So what do we actually need to have a fire? What do I need to have a fire? Well, 3 things. We need those 3. Take one away, no fire. Can't do it. So the first thing we need is oxygen. Air. Air is mostly nitrogen, but contains about 20% oxygen, a little bit more. We also need heat. Fire's hot. And we also need fuel. If you don't have anything to burn, how are you going to have a fire? Here, I've got fuel, which is the gas coming from the little lighter. That's the fuel. The heat comes from a little spark, a little electric spark. And of course, the oxygen comes from the air. And if I want to put out the fire, I can do 2 things. I can be very silly and go, and basically I took away the oxygen by smothering it. Or what I can do is simply take away the fuel by switching it off. So you need these 3 things. So there's our fire triangle. Fire with heat, fuel, and oxygen. Now you need your heat. Usually there's a source of ignition, of starting that fire. In this case, it was the spark. What other sources of ignition can you think of? Well, I'm sure you can think of many. There's obvious ones. We would have some, like, for example, naked flames, cigarettes, matches, anything like that, which is why a lot of places now are no smoking. It's terribly bad for your health, but also it can be quite dangerous if you have flammable materials around. So they've actually banned smoking in many places for those two reasons. We can have other sparks. You can have a deliberate spark because this has a device in it that will cause a spark when I hit the switch. Or there are other sparks. For example, if I'm carrying a metal bucket and you're carrying a metal bucket and we bang into each other, oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that, but our 2 buckets might bang and cause a spark. And there have been cases where in Nigeria, people have breached some of the fuel pipelines and all the villagers are coming along to get some free fuel. Hey, free fuel here, that's good. And all of a sudden there's a spark and wham, the whole thing goes up. Any hot surface can reach a sufficient temperature to ignite something. Or one that we tend to forget about, static electricity. You know, if you get something nylon material and you rub it very quickly and then you go to touch something metal, bang, you can actually feel a little spark, you get a little electric shock. So that can be a source of ignition as well. Fuel can be solid, you can use some wood, or it can be liquid, or it can be gas. So with liquid, it's a little bit strange. We'll talk about that in a little while. Sometimes it's the liquid burning, sometimes it's the vapor from the liquid burning, not the liquid itself. So, and then of course, you need the oxygen. And we all know oxygen. Well, where do you get oxygen? You get oxygen in the air. That's the easy part. We all know that. But you need to think, what about ventilation? If a building's very warm, and it's actually quite warm in my country here today, I'm just going to look at my phone and see if I can find out how warm it is today. It is 17 degrees. I know you guys are struggling in about 30 and 40 out in Lagos, but here I'm just in a shirt, no vest. I wasn't even wearing a tie before we started. I took it off earlier because 17 degrees is quite warm. We don't have it. Our air conditioning in this country is just open the window and you cool down immediately. So we're quite, we consider 17 degrees warm, but ventilation can be important in hot countries. It's important here too. But ventilation ducts are just basically a pathway for fire. You're just creating a motorway, a highway, an autobahn for the fire to spread, and also the smoke, especially if you've got a fan that normally would pump fresh air through the building. That's great. We all want the fresh air. But all of a sudden there's a fire, and if that fire is near the pumps, is near the fans, all they're going to do is immediately pump smoke, toxic smoke, choking smoke, smothering smoke through the whole building. So that's one of the reasons why, if you have any firefighting system, if you have any fire detection systems, one of the things it should do the minute it detects there's a fire in the building is switch off the entire ventilation. You do not want to feed the fire with oxygen, and you do not want to actually spread that smoke around the whole place. Oxygen, we can get oxygen another way. If a welder is coming along, he can bring oxygen cylinders, and those cylinders themselves, once they get warm enough, they can actually explode like a bomb with a massive force. And if they're in a building that's on fire, and the fire brigade come and the fire brigade put the fire out, in the UK, they will not enter that building for 24 hours to allow any cylinders to cool down, in case they walk in and the cylinder, just which would be under pressure, would go bang and explode in their face. So some materials, when you actually burn them, release oxygen themselves, and that can make them very difficult to actually put out, because how can you take away the oxygen? The more you actually burn the thing, the more oxygen it's creating. So that's our fire triangle, and that helps us understand fire. And now that we understand fire a little bit better, we can try and fight the thing. So if we want to fight the fire, there are 4 basic ways of doing it. And they all are based on, well, 3 of them anyway are based on removing one of the fire triangle. The 4th is actually almost the same when we think about it. So what's the first way? Cool it down, remove the heat. And that's one of the simplest things. How would we all as children know to put out a fire? You throw water on the fire. It's a little tiny fire outside, throw a bucket of water on it. And what's the water doing? Well, the first thing it's doing is removing the heat. It's cooling it down. Just like you cool yourself down. It's a really, really warm day, and you might want a cold shower. You might want to go and swim in the swimming pool or a sea or a river or something like that, just to cool yourself off a little bit. You want to remove that heat. And we would use our water fire extinguishers. The next thing is to smother the fire. We can remove the oxygen. And you saw them trying it in one of our videos. You saw the policeman, the guy, his clothes were on fire, and they were wrapping a coat around him and patting the coat to basically remove all the oxygen, to smother the fire. And foam will do that. If you spray foam on, the foam stops the oxygen getting to the fire. It doesn't remove any heat at all, but it stops the oxygen getting there. That will stop the fire. Another thing we have, and we have these in kitchens, is a fire blanket. And the reason we have fire blankets in kitchens is because we don't really want a water fire extinguisher, because there's usually a lot of electricity in a kitchen. You've got your electric cooker maybe. You have an electric toaster. You have an electric kettle. Let's see what's in my kitchen. I've got my kettle, I've got my toaster, I've got a coffee machine, I've got a coffee grinder, I've got a fridge, I've got a freezer, I've got a machine for washing my clothes. Is that it? Yes, I think that's. Oh, and I've also got the controls for my hot water. My hot water is gas generated. Everything else is but electric in the house, but my hot water is gas generated. So there's a boiler there, and the boilers run off electricity as well. So that's 8 devices in my kitchen, all of which are using electricity. So if I was to go in and spray water around there, there would be short circuits, sparks, all kinds of things going on. So we don't want water extinguishers in kitchens. What do we have? Well, we have a fire blanket. And you see the fire blanket is, you hang it up. This one's empty, but this is the cover of one, and then you can take the fire blanket out the bottom. And I have a fire blanket here. And this fire blanket has been used. So once something like that is used once, you get a new one, you replace it with a new one, you throw out the old one. I keep the old one, not that I'm going to use it, except for a demonstration of showing you. So here's our fire blanket. You can see the burns on it, all the black bits. You can see where it was put over a burning pan there. There's the round pan. This thing was over it. So what do? Let's say I've got a pan, maybe a pan filled with fat, and the fat's on fire. Maybe another pan and there's some kind of food in it which is on fire. Any oily food, any fatty food. And we want to actually put the fire out. So I'm going to do something with this. I'm going to show you what some people do, and it's very, very wrong. And if you think you know what I'm doing wrong, I want you to maybe raise your hand or do something for Leon to see, and then he'll ask you to unmute yourself, and you can tell me what mistake you think I'm making, because it's a very bad mistake. So here I am. You're the fire. The camera you're looking through is the fire, and I'm going to come and smother the fire. I did something wrong. Well, Leon, is anybody?
Yes, we have Mr. Adeleke Sheriff. Kindly unmute yourself. Mr. Adeleke, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. What was I doing wrong?
You've actually get close to where the fire is burning. Shouldn't be close that extent.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yes. But
to have the blanket on the fire.
Yes, I have to put the blanket over the fire. But
you shouldn't get close to the fire to that extent that you get close to.
Well, that's what the fire blankets are for. They're for small fires that you can put them over and put them out. So this is heat proof and fireproof material. So that's what they're for. But I was still using it very wrong. Now let's see if Samson or Eric can answer. Let's give them a chance.
Mr. Samson, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I also think that, like he indicated, for small fires, you can use the fire blankets. You should be brave enough to cover the fire till you see a white smoke before you take it off. But he put it on and immediately took it off. Thank you.
Well, that was just so I could see you and you could see me. Normally, when you put the fire blanket on, you're right, you leave it on. You will leave it on, turn everything else in the kitchen off, leave that blanket on, and then maybe after half an hour or whatever, when everything has cooled down, you can take it off. But no, you guys still haven't got it. I'm doing something very, very wrong.
Let's ask Mr. Nudeko. Mr. Nudeko, you can unmute yourself as well.
Okay, so thank you so much. What I realized was that even when you were coming to cover the fire, you did not spread the blanket fully. You should have gotten the hand span to the left and full span to the right, covering almost your face, even though you can see through, and then you cover ears. That's what I expected you to do.
That is true. The only problem is that my camera's got quite a narrow view. So if I had to go back really, really far, you can barely see. And I'm trying to illustrate the problem with what I'm doing. I am doing something wrong.
So maybe Mr. Okoli Kenneth also is raising up his hand. Mr. Okoli.
Okay. If I would like to add, like what my other colleagues have said, I think the only thing you are doing wrong is the aim of using the fire blanket is actually to take off the oxygen so that the fire doesn't continue. So in a way, you put the blanket, if it allows air to flow in, then that is what you are doing wrong. So you are supposed to hold the blanket in such a way that it will prevent oxygen inflow.
You are supposed to do that, yes. Again, it's basically the fact that I can't demonstrate properly because of this little narrow screen. But I was still doing something wrong that so far nobody's got.
Finally, we have Ola Sukami. Maybe he might have the right answer. Mr. or Mrs. Ola Sukami. Please, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity given to me as well. I think his hand is not far away from the light, from the fire rather.
Correct. My hand, I'm going to get burned. I'm going to come up like this and I have to reach over the fire. And what's going to happen to my hands? They're going to get hit with the flames. They're going to burn. And of course, that's going to hurt me. And I'm going to go, oh. And the fire blanket ends up on the floor. And that's why the fire blanket has these tags. And I take the tag and I hold it like that. I wrap it like that and I hold it like this. So that's the way I'm going. The flames are not hitting my hand. I'm going over quickly and the flames are hitting the outside of the blanket. The heat will not hit my hand if I'm quick. They will take time to penetrate, so the heat's not going to get me and the flames aren't going to get me. So you have to use both these. So I stand, I hold this like this. So that's what you see coming towards you. And from behind, you'll see I'm holding by the tags. I don't want to reach over like this. So that's the key thing about the fire blanket. Okay, starving, remove the fuel. So for instance, if it's a breach in the pipeline and that's burning, you turn off the fuel flowing down the pipeline. If we have gas burning, we shut off the flow of gas wherever we can. If it's, when we can see in our little picture, third one along, a firefighter in probably America or Canada or some country that has forests, where there's a forest fire, one of the things they'll do is they can create a fire break. They go to a place where the trees are very thin, the wind is blowing the fire in one direction. They find a place where there's not too many trees and they will actually clear the ground away so there's only bare soil. You know, soil doesn't burn. it needs vegetation, it needs bushes, it needs trees to burn for something like that. So we can remove the fuel. The fourth one then is it's like removing all of the elements of the fire triangle, because the chain of combustion, the burning, can be blocked by certain chemicals. Certain chemicals like halon or FM 200, and they actually prevent the fire triangle combining. Even though the things are all there, they can't just combine. A chemist will give a better explanation. You simply need to know that it's interfering with the chemical reaction and it knocks out the fire. And it does so very, very fast. Halon is probably the quickest at knocking down a fire. However, environmentally, it's very bad. There's only 2 places I ever see a halon fire extinguisher these days. One of them, well, my wife actually might be looking at one of them on Tuesday morning, because she'll be leaving Lagos to fly first of all to Casablanca and then to fly to Heathrow, where I'll be waiting for her over in London. I'll go over in the morning. And when you're on a plane, and I've seen these on ARIC, I've seen these on almost all airlines, if you ever go up and you're walking along to go and visit the toilet on the plane to ease yourself, have a look at the fire extinguisher. Some of them are halon, because if you're on an airplane, a fire is very dangerous indeed. You can crash. So you don't really care about a little bit of halon getting into the environment and disturbing the environment. You'd like to live. So they use halon fire extinguishers that'll kill the fire very quickly. Down on the ground, we tend to use FM 200, which is a powdery type of substance, and it comes down and interferes and stops the combustion. And quite a lot of the fire suppression systems in the banks, for example, in Nigeria, I'm not giving away anything about clients, but I did work with First Bank, and in the First Bank headquarters on Marina, Kakawa Street, then their fire suppression system is FM 200 up in the server rooms. They use FM 200 in server rooms as well, particularly because of all the computer equipment. If you go in with a fire extinguisher and spray water everywhere, you're going to destroy all the servers anyway. So there's no difference between what you're doing and what the fire will do. But if you have an FM 200 system, it can come down, it can kill all of the fire, and you will preserve the computer servers that all your banking materials and everything, all your details, all your transactions are held on. So let's move on another little bit. So there's basically 5 types of fire. Class A is the one that really we're most familiar with. I'll tell you, light a fire out the back. Go into the backyard and light a fire. And you'll probably just gather up wood, paper, cloth, furniture, maybe bits of rubbish or unwanted stuff around the house, pretty solid material, and then you'll just burn it. And you know that Class A fires, if you want to put them out, well, let them burn out or just throw a bucket of water over them. That's as good a way of getting rid of them as any. Class B involves liquids or liquefied solids. You can have certain things that are fats and they look like kind of jelly or something like that. And at a high temperature, they melt and they're a liquid. Or you can have other liquids that are like paint. So they can go on fire. Paint can go on fire. One of the things they actually discovered from the space program was that you could have fireproof paint. And that has saved so many lives. Everybody says, oh, well, there's lots of problems on the Earth. Why are we wasting money on a space program going to the moon and going into space? Well, I can tell you that in order to do that, they had to advance science, material science, all other kinds of science, biological science. They had to do so much. They have saved hundreds of thousands of lives and advanced humanity. It has been probably the most cost-effective endeavor and the most value for your money that of anything that the human race has ever done. So, fireproof paint, just one of the thousands of things to come out of the space program. But class B, we split that into two classes anyway. We have B1, liquids that are soluble in water. And then we have the second one, liquids not soluble in water. And the one that we're really most familiar with is oil and water. What's it they always say? If you have a guy and he meets a girl and the two of them aren't getting on, they're not compatible, you say, oh, those two over there, they're like oil and water. They just don't mix. You can't get them together. One's over here, one's over here. The petrol or the oil will float on top of the water. That's why it's so dangerous if there's a oil tanker out at sea. How do you get near it? Because as soon as there's fire, as soon as it starts to leak oil, that spreads all around it. And if that goes in fire, you can't actually get into it to put that fire out. And it's, everybody says, oh, look, the water's burning. No, it's not. No, it's the oil on top of the water that's burning. To be correct about petrol, it's not petrol burning. You don't burn petrol. If you get the petrol either lying on the ground or lying on top of water and you throw a match at it and you look at what happens, as soon as the match gets close, the fire starts. It doesn't touch the petrol. The petrol is very volatile. It gives off fumes. And we all know that, and we all smell that. You walk past a petrol station and go, you know, you can smell the petrol. You spill any on your hand, you can smell it. Spill any in your clothes, you can have to wash your clothes maybe 2 or 3 times to get rid of that smell of petrol. It's very, very volatile. And as the flame and the match comes close to it, it's actually the fumes that ignite. That, of course, makes the petrol warmer because of the heat. The petrol's not burning, but it is warm. And the warmer it gets, the more fumes it gives off. So that's our problem with that. Then we have class C, and class C would be gases. So this is a class C fire. Butane, propane, I don't even know which one they're using, and I have a little refill over there. I'm not even bothered to find which gas it is. This is just used for lighting candles when I would have scented candles around the house, or when my wife gets here, give a nice romantic atmosphere. So I'll use that to light the candles, but I don't know which gas it is, but it's one of the flammable ones. Some metals are actually flammable at certain temperatures. Aluminium can burn. So the aluminium is strong metal and it's a light metal, but if the temperature is high enough, it can burn. So you have to be very careful. And they do use it in aircraft and things like that. And magnesium. Magnesium burns at an incredibly high temperature. A lot when I was in school, a little schoolboy at the age of about 11 doing the chemistry classes, the chemistry teacher always used to get just a tiny little bit of magnesium. It would be maybe a tiny little piece of magnesium. Would be, I've just got a little tablet here. It would be maybe, there's a little tablet. And you can see my finger, and that little tablet would be maybe 4 times the size of the bit of magnesium that he got. And he put it in a metal plate and set fire to it. And you see the whole thing going up, incredible temperature. We had to stand well back, even just from a tiny little thing like that. And class F then, oils and fats at high temperatures. You can have a fat at a high temperature in my kitchen, but that's nothing compared to the ones in big commercial kitchens. I'm only kind of cooking a little bit just for me, just maybe 1 or 2 friends if they're over. But when you're in a commercial kitchen, oh yeah, we have to now cook. There'll probably be 300 people come through here tonight. We have to have lots of stuff cooking. So those are the basic types of fire. So what do we think about this now? Let's move on to some of our fire safety. Basic principles of fire. Now, you're going to get, Leon can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm right here. But I think you're all going to get copies of these slides. So you can study these at your leisure. You can keep them, read through them. That's okay. But here's our A, B, C, D, electrical fires, and F. And there's water fire extinguishers, foam fire extinguishers, dry powder fire extinguishers, very special dry powder for those things like magnesium and lithium, the burning metals that even just a normal powder wouldn't do. It would melt that powder, it would deactivate it, it would disassociate its properties. So you need special dry powder for that. You've got CO2 gas and you've got wet chemical. So you've got the different kinds of fire extinguisher for the different kinds of fire. So it's very important to consider what happens if the wrong type's used. So think of a piece of machinery. What happens if you put water on it? Wow. You can actually take out the electrical system of the whole building. Leave yourself in the dark, trapped in a burning building in the dark. That's not a good position to be in. Same with a television or monitor, you'll destroy the thing. It could only be a tiny little fire that if you smothered it out, it would only really burn a little bit of the back, bit of the surround. But as soon as you start putting water on it, you're ruining the whole thing. A fuse box, a petrol spill. If you spread water on a petrol fire, well, the water will run everywhere. And all you're going to do is the petrol will float on top of it. So all you're doing is spreading the fire. You turn up with a bucket of water, throw it over a petrol fire, and a small petrol fire now turns into a rather big petrol fire. So you haven't really helped if you've done that. A frying pan or deep fat fire in the kitchen, the minute you try and put water into that, whoosh, the whole thing will go everywhere. You'll have boiling water and boiling fat and everything. So that's why we use the fire blanket on the frying pan if it's burning, not water. Okay, so we can talk about some causes of fire. Now, you've got, there are percentages for all of these, but believe it or not, malicious fire, arson, there's quite a lot of fires are started deliberately like that. One year in the UK, it was about 40%. 4 out of every 10 fires that required the fire brigade were actually criminal acts. Somebody wanted to, I don't like you, I'm going to burn your shop down. Some of the racists, we do have some in every country, they're always racists. They don't like black people, then they don't like white people, or they don't like Chinese people, or they don't like, there's always racists in every society, unfortunately. And sometimes what they do is they decide, we don't want these people living with us. So what we'll do is we'll pour petrol through their letterbox and then throw through a match, and they set houses on fire. And the whole idea is that the people inside will run out of the house, they have all their possessions burned, and they'll go and live somewhere else, and you'll have driven them out of the area. That's their idea. Doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes they actually burn the whole house down and kill the family inside. And then they get, when they're caught, and they're nearly always caught, they don't just go to prison for arson, they go to prison for murder. So malicious fires, very important, and that's across the world in every country. You do get a significant number of fires started deliberately. Then we have faulty fuel supplies. You're not storing your fuel correctly, or you're storing your fuel in the wrong type of fuel, too much of it in close proximity to places where it shouldn't be. You know, you don't want to have your fuel next door to sources of ignition. You want to keep the sources of ignition as far away from the fuel, and the fuel as far away from the sources of ignition as you safely can. faulty appliances and equipment. And that's why the one thing really does annoy me. What do you see when people have a plug? People have a little plug and they want to plug it in, and then they charge their phone, or maybe I would use my electric shaver if it's plugged in, or something else like that. But sometimes you're maybe traveling around a bit, and I used to do a lot of travel, and you might have a 3-pin plug, or a 2-pin plug, or a round plug, or a rectangular plug. So sometimes people just, oh, it's the wrong type of plug. Cut the plug off, strip 2 bare wires, and then you can see they go, and they, if it's a 3-pin socket, they lift up the little lever in the top pin and stick the 2 bare wires in. And I see that in Niger all the time. I also see that sometimes the room in a hotel might not be finished off correctly. And you look and you see the power socket in the wall, and you can see the gaps where the plaster work has not filled it in. So there's actually, you could put your fingers in behind it, or a child could anyway, and touch the bare wires, or something else could get in behind, touch the bare wires and start a fire. So faulty appliances can be a big problem. I even sometimes see them hanging off a wall. Anybody who's stayed a lot in Niger hotels will see that. They're bound to have been in a room at some stage where the plug has not been proper, and it's hanging off the wall. And again, you're just waiting for a spark or something, and you can start a fire. You can have misuse of equipment, using equipment for something it's not supposed to be used for. The simplest one would be a power block, intended for me to use. I have one socket that I can put one device in, but I want to use several devices. So I get one of these extension leads with 4 sockets on it. And that's not enough. So then I use another one. So now I've got about 8 to use, and I overload the one socket with about 8 or 9 devices, all drawing power, and it gets warmer and it gets warmer and it gets warmer, and wham, something goes in fire. Deep fat fryers, I don't like them. I wouldn't have one in my house. They're much too dangerous. Careless handling of hot materials. Putting materials too close to a heat source. You want to dry your clothes. You maybe live in a climate that's a little bit damp, like this country can be most of the time. So what do? You get your clothes, maybe you have an open fire, and you put a chair near the open fire, and you put your clothes over the back of the chair, put them near the fire. Hopefully the heat will help dry them out. But if you put it too close, they can go on fire. And then there would be other causes, of course. So let's just move on to our next one. What do you do when a fire is detected? Well, the first thing you're supposed to do is raise the alarm. But it's useful to know with who. Who do you raise the alarm with? Who do you tell? And how? Seems a very simple question. I'll tell you in a little while how that can go so badly wrong. Right. So I'm sure some of you will not believe what I'm going to tell you now, but I know it for a fact. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've heard it with my own ears. And I've worked with fire brigades. I have gone in and assessed their systems, and particularly the control room. The fire brigade in a city, we would have citywide fire brigade paid for by the city, and the fire brigade there would have a control room. And every time you ring and ask for the fire brigade anywhere in the city, the call goes to the central command, and they answer the phone. And I have had to go in and check these people, and they all tell me, yes, we've had instances of this happening. And what is it? Somebody rings up and goes, help, help, my house is on fire, come quickly, bang. What's the problem? The problem is, who are you? More importantly, where are you? Where's this fire that we're going to come and save you from? I don't know. Now, of course, if your country is very advanced, if the city in particular is very advanced, as soon as a call is routed to them, they immediately track it. They know, they recognize the call that's coming from this number, right? Where is that? Even if it's on a mobile, they know, right, that's pinging off these 2 or 3 towers. It has to be between those 3. They have a rough idea. So even if I do that, they'll have it. But why should you waste time having them do that? What a lot of people do is, the other thing some people do, there'll be a fire and everybody evacuates the building and they're all standing outside on the other side of the road and they're all waiting for the fire brigade to come. And finally somebody says, Leon, did you ring the fire brigade? And Leon says, no, John, I thought it was Eric was to ring the fire brigade. So Eric, did you ring the fire brigade? No, I thought that was you, John. No, it wasn't me. And we asked around and do you know what? Nobody's rung the fire brigade. So the fire brigade don't come. So what we generally, and it's better for 2 or 3 people to ring the fire brigade. The fire brigade don't mind. Yes, we know about it. Thank you. That's fine. That hasn't hurt anybody. But if everybody's standing around thinking somebody else did it and nobody's done it, we have a big problem. You may think that's so stupid, and it is stupid, yes. And you may think it's so obvious, and it is obvious, yes. And does it happen? Many, many, many times, more than I believed even after I experienced it and seen it myself. And it can be got round so simply. What most people will do is they will say, okay, when the fire brigade goes, we maybe have security men here. We maybe have a receptionist in our foyer to greet all the visitors coming in. So we will pick whoever's on reception, this is their duty, and whoever is head of security or deputizing for or covering for them at the moment, and it will be their job to ring the fire brigade. Now, of course, particularly the receptionist, maybe not so much the security guy, but really for both of them, they might panic. Oh, there's a fire, there's a fire, there's a fire. And they start, and what's your address? Oh, our street is, and you get brain freeze. And, you know, sometimes people ask you a very, very simple question. And you're sitting going, and you know the answer. It's an answer you've been using for 10 years. You know, the things I've known all my life, and you suddenly ask me the question, particularly an old man like me, you ask me the question, I'm going, let me think. And then because you can't think of it, you get flustered, and that makes it even more difficult to think of it. So make it simple and straightforward and easy. Get a little piece of paper, maybe only this size, an A4 sheet folded in half. Print it out on your printer what you want them to say. Is that the fire brigade? Yes. This is name of your company, premises, whatever. Our address is that we are on fire, and stay on the line. And then after that, they can maybe ask you, is everybody out of the building? Is it a big fire? Is it a small fire? All the other things they'll want to know. But by telling them that initially, the fire brigade is already on its way, and your messages can be relayed to them by the command center then. And you get that little piece of paper. You only have to print out 2 or 3 lines on it with your address, where you are, anything else you think is relevant that the fire brigade should know, and laminate it and get 2 or 3 of these, leave one in the desk of the security office, give one to the head of security, leave one on the reception desk or 2 in the reception desk, and then people will know what to do. Okay, so now we've raised the alarm, great. So depending on the country you're in, depending on the location you're in, no matter what the country is, fire in a city, a big city, will be responded to quicker than a fire in a rural area out in the bush or anything like that. So you have to decide while you're waiting for the fire brigade, do we fight the fire or do we evacuate? Now, most people are not trained how to properly fight a fire. You saw the speed of even a tiny fire, and that can just completely overwhelm somebody who's never experienced it before. So fighting a fire, any fire, even a small fire, is actually a job for trained professionals, for the fire brigade and the emergency services. They train for that. Sometimes you've no choice. It may be that, for example, you're an oil facility and you would have your own dedicated firefighters, in which case that's their job. And they may simply want you, let us know where the fire is, and then you get to safe place. So you'll make that decision. Different countries, facilities, cultures do have different approaches to fight or evacuate, but you'll have to make that decision. Hopefully you will have been given guidance. Your company will say, no, the only people fighting the fire will be these people here. Your job is to get out, to go to the assembly point. So you should follow the instructions and guidance given to you by your organization. And of course, I told you I've been working in Nigeria for 22 years, back and forward. And usually the instructions they give to me, because remember, an awful lot of Weebos are just fresh fish and they're getting off the plane. Never been in Africa before in their life. They don't know what it is. They're not well traveled, so they just don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden, wham, a fire happens and everybody starts to panic. They haven't got a clue. So a lot of people keep it simple and they say, right, you're in our facility. We're a high-risk facility, maybe an oil field or something like that. You have a guide with you. Your job is simple. Do what the guide tells you. Okay, that's fine. I'll do that. Guide says, follow me. We're going here. I will do that. So you follow the instructions and guidance given to you by your organization or the organization you're visiting and whose premises you're on. So there's a couple of key rules here that I want everybody to try and remember. Even a small fire can spread and grow much, much more rapidly than any of us expect. Another one, the real golden rule, the first of the 10 commandments or fire or whatever, never, never, never let the fire get behind you. In other words, between you and a safe exit. You should always keep the fire in front of you and your safe exit behind you. If that fire grows and it forces me back, it's simply forcing me out of the building where I want to be. So don't let that fire get between you and your exit. And that's why a lot of places will have 2 exits. We go onto a big long corridor. There's a fire door at that end of the corridor. There's a fire door at that end of the corridor. If the fire's down there, I'll go this way. If it's down there, I'll go that way. Remember, more people die from smoke inhalation than are actually burned to death. And even when we see a fire where there's a lot of bodies burned, quite often the people were dead before the body started to burn. They were choked, they were suffocated by that horrendous toxic smoke. Another thing about fire extinguishers. Fire extinguishers, if you have used half the contents of a fire extinguisher and the blaze is not almost out, it's time to go. Even if it looks as if it is out, remember, fires can spring back from a tiny little flicker to a great blaze very quickly indeed. Where do people normally put fire extinguishers? This gives you clues to what they're for. If you ask people a simple question, what's a fire extinguisher for? They say, you must be stupid. Fire extinguisher. It's for extinguishing fires. It's in the name, you know. All you have to be able to do is say it. You should know it. You know, fire extinguisher is for extinguishing fires. No, it's not. If you have no choice, it is. But a fire extinguisher's job is to protect a fire exit. And that's why normally the fire extinguishers are put in certain places. They would be put beside fire doors. And the idea is that if you've no choice, I'm trapped in this building somehow, I don't know how I got trapped in it, but I am trapped in it, and the fire is near, it's coming near that fire exit, and there are other people, we need to hold that fire exit to get those people out. Then I use the fire extinguisher. I want it close there. I don't want to have to run back and try and get into the flames to find a fire extinguisher. The fire extinguishers are there to protect the fire exits, because the key thing is life. If the building burns down, tough, build another building. If people are killed, those people are gone. So, okay, let's move on again. When do you fight? When do you run? Well, when you're part of a team in your facility dedicated to that eventuality, then you have to fight it. When the fire's between you and the exit, then you have no choice. Then you fight it. If it's really, really tiny, like a little flicker off a cigarette that might be just about to set one sheet of paper alight, maybe you'd fight that. But usually your job should be get to the assembly point and leave it to the professionals. Excuse me. Now, wide out of doors, smoke's usually not so much of a danger. We saw it going up. When confined in a building, it's lethal. The hot air rises, carrying the smoke upwards through the building. And when it can't move up, it spreads out. And that's why we want, remember about the ventilation systems, that's why you want the ventilation systems turned off. Fire can spread through convection, conduction, radiation, or direct burning. These are the mechanisms of heat transfer. And again, I'll just let you have a look at that slide later on. It's not really that important to what we want to do. When we're designing our buildings, we try to do something called compartment and contain. You want to compartmentalize the building, keep it into little blocks that can be sealed off. That way, the fire, if this area goes on fire, it can't spread to the others. So compartment, part of a building separated from the rest by walls and floors, and is designed to contain the fire for a specific time. So if it's like a wooden building and the walls are wood and the floor and the ceiling's wood, it's not compartmentalized, because it's going to, unless the wood's treated and fire resistant, we can treat wood to be fire resistant for a certain period of time. That's usually about 35 minutes, 25 to 35, depending where you are in the world. But that means at least it can be held back for long enough for the fire brigade to get there, and more importantly for you to get out of the building and get to safety. But that's only good if the place is completely sealed. If there's just one little gap, let me tell you, the fire will find it. You mightn't find it, but the fire will find it, and wham, and that's where it'll go out. So if I want to run electrical cables to the room next door, and I drill a hole in the wall, the fire will find the hole and go through the hole. So what do? Drill the hole, put the cables through, and then you put plaster or cement or something around that to stop that happening. Then we also have our fire doors. Now, fire doors, they are so misused in every single country. I'm going to tell you horror stories about Nigeria, and those same things, horror stories in my country, in the UK and in Ireland. I'm an Irishman. I've seen them happen in both. Everywhere I've been, I've seen stories, horror stories with fire doors. Number one, sometimes people prop a fire door open. Well, that's a security problem for a start. And number two, once that door is propped open, if a fire starts and everybody forgets to open it or to close it behind them, then the fire gets out and spreads. The other thing, which is much worse, is sometimes people lock a fire door. They do that for security. And I'll tell you some very nasty things that can happen there. But first, look at the actual picture of the fire door. It's not like a handle with a key that you unlock, because what often happens is people will panic and they will run for the fire door, and the first person there has to open the fire door. And if it's difficult to open, if he has to open it inwards, for example, that's a no-no, because the people pushing behind him are pushing him up against the door. He can't get back to open a lock or use a handle or pull the door inwards. So fire doors always open out. So if you push me into that fire door, there's a bar there, I'll be pushed against the bar and the door will open and we'll all fall out of the building. I mightn't be very pleased at you for pushing me when you should have had the manners to just walk quickly behind me, but at least you have pushed me out of the building, not prevented me from opening the doors. So fire doors always open out. Now, sometimes for security reasons, people will actually, seal the doors. They lock them. And then what happens? People are going to get killed, definitely. And I can remember a large institution. I'm just, somebody's trying to get me here. I'm going to have to tell them on a Zoom call. Good, maybe they'll get the message now. So I was doing a health and safety inspection on a very large building, 16 stories high in VI. For all the Echo boys out there, you'll know this building. I'm not going to say it, but I'll bet you almost everybody in VI has walked past it. In fact, most Lagosians would know exactly where it is. And it had 3 staircases. Now, of course, you know we don't use lifts in the event of a fire because the electric can go, and that's going to mean a big problem. That's going to mean that you could be trapped in a lift. So you don't go in a lift if there's a fire. You use the stairs. And the people, there were 3 stairwells, and this was a building that could have had maybe nearly 2,000 people in it. So there could at any one time be, say, 600 people coming down each staircase. Of course, we know what's going to happen. People are going to go for the nearest exit. So you're only going to get one staircase with almost nobody going down it, another staircase with a couple of hundred people going down it, and the third staircase that everybody will use with well over 1,000 going down it. So I always say, no matter who it is, I'll take the senior directors and I say, let's walk the fire exits. So we walk down this and they're all thinking, now what a waste of time, this stupid Oweebo, call Oweebo. So no, just please trust me, please, let's try it. So we walk down to the bottom, all 16 floors. And there was a fire door. I said, they'll see. But there was a chain around the fire door on the inside. And there was a padlock on the chain. And I said, wait a minute, we can't get out. And they said, well, so what happens? How do we get out? We're now all trapped. And it's just 5 or 6 of us here at the minute on an exercise. But in fact, we could have another 1,000 people screaming and pushing at us behind us, panicking, and in a real situation. What happens? And they said, well, the security man's supposed to be here and open the fire door and unlock that. So I said, okay, let's call him and see how quickly he can do it. So they called him. The guy arrived 6 minutes later. Think of our first video, what that room was like in 1 minute. So what I should have been able to do is just push and walk out 2 or 3 seconds. Instead, 5 minutes later, while we're standing there going, looking at the time, looking at the watch, what's going on here? So he eventually came. And he brought a big ring of keys. And I don't know if you see some of these very old films about the castles and dungeons of long ago. And the jailer has a big key and he's got about 30 or 40 keys on it. This guy had something like that with about 30 or 40 keys on it. So he goes and he starts opening them, and which one? No, it's not that one. And of course, you always miss it. It's the right key, but you just haven't clicked it right, and you're in a rush and you're hurrying up, and you have to go round twice before you get the right key. And then eventually, by this stage now, I'm saying to them, it's now about well over 10 minutes, probably near 15, since we asked to get that door open. You do realize if this was a real fire, every single one of us is dead by now. So finally, he got it unlocked and he took all the chains off, and they went to push the doors open, and some absolute idiot had parked a car outside the fire doors, and we got it open about 6 inches and it stopped. So this is real. I saw it happen in Lagos. I've seen it happen everywhere else as well. And fire brigades in every country will tell you of situations they come across like this. So you really have to be very, very careful. With any fire, again, going back to that speed, the key thing is the detection and the warning system. If you want to take any action at all, the fire has first to be detected and the alarm raised. So how can you detect a fire? Well, quite often we detect a fire because we simply see it. Oh, look, there's a fire. Or you smell it. Or you can even hear the crackling. But you can have devices that do it. So you may have a smoke detector that will look for smoke. You may have a heat detector. So there's lots of ways when and then they'll beep, 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 beep. So you can, but you have to test them, and you have to test them regularly. And sometimes if it's a very big building, people will simply go to the main control panel and hit the test button. That's not good enough. That tells you, yes, the bells are working, you're ringing, you can hear them, the panel is working. But that panel is fed by call points all over the building, by these break glass units and alarm points all over the building. How do you know they're working? You should have a schedule where each of those is tested, maybe every couple of weeks or something like that, and you work your way around so that at the end of the year, every call point and the central panel has been tested. How do you raise the alarm? Well, there can be bells, there can be whistles, you can shout, you can do whatever you want. But remember, you don't just raise the alarm with your co-workers, you also raise the alarm with the fire brigade. So, evacuation. We need now to evacuate. And what are the key issues in evacuating? You need a planned and safe route. There's no point in thinking, oh, the building's on fire now. How's the safe route to get out of here? It needs to be planned. And remember the fire door that had the car parked outside it. You need to keep that route free from any obstructions. You're not allowed to store anything there. Not even, and people will say, but I'm only going to be 2 minutes. That could be the wrong 2 minutes. Remember that first video again. That's the reason I keep talking about it. And that's the reason we always show it at the start. That's 1 minute. And even half of that was too long with all the flame and the smoke and everything. So people who say, oh, I'll move it in a minute, I'll move it in a minute. No, you won't. You'll move it right now. Get it shifted. And if I see that happening again, we'll report you or take some kind of sanctions, whatever it is. You shouldn't be putting anything on a fire route. And your security people need to be walking those fire routes on a daily basis, at least once, maybe twice a day, once in the afternoon as well, just to make sure nobody's leaving anything there. Well, what happens? It's only a small box. Yeah, it's only a small box, but if I trip over that box and the guy behind me trips over me, you know, we've had panics in big crowds. You've had some terrible tragedies at Mecca when the Muslims are moving in a big crowd round their holy stone, and somebody trips and falls, and then there's a crush. So crowds need to be managed well, and the key thing is keep everything clear. You can't have the slightest trip hazard. In fact, here, when we build a fire escape, there's a guy will come along and he'll look at every step. The riser, you've got your step and you've got your riser on any stairs. And the risers are all supposed to be exactly the same height. Because you get into a rhythm. You get into a rhythm going up and going down. And when we're walking up and down stairs, you don't actually look at every step as you put your foot in it. No, you don't do that. You're just getting into the rhythm. And then all it takes is one that's an inch too high or an inch too low, maybe even less, and you trip. And that can cause people to trip over behind you. So your route needs to be kept free from obstruction. It needs to be marked clearly and ensure it remains lit in the event of a power cut, which is why we have emergency lighting. So you can still get out of the building, and the emergency lighting is battery operated so that when the electric power cuts, you can actually still see to get out. So once you've got out, you have to get to a safe area, a muster point. And how do you know everybody's at the muster point? Well, do a roll call. And again, what do we happen there? What do we see happening there? We actually have situations arising, and somebody is out of the building and hasn't told anybody they're out of the building. They decide to go off to lunch. Somebody says, oh, look, the building's on fire, your building's on fire. Oh, well, great, I'm enjoying my lunch here. I'll go back after it's all over. So people keep annoying me. So they're going to actually stay away. That's going to cause a problem. When the fire brigade get there, the first thing they'll say to everybody is anybody still in the building? This is the main priority, human life. If somebody's in the building, they will have to enter that building and try and rescue that person. If nobody's in the building, okay, we can just try and actually, I will have to check and see what this guy is doing here, because he's really, really, really annoying me. On a Zoom call. Okay. Told him. Good. Right. So they want to know who's in the building. Do we have to rescue anybody? And the worst answer is, I don't know. The best answer is everybody's out. The next best is 3 people are in the building. One's usually up there, one's usually over there, and one's usually there. You don't know where they are at the minute, but at least there's a starting point for any search. But to say, I don't know. You also have a situation where, let's say the security guy has done the roll call and you left the building, didn't tell anybody you're not there. You've gone off somewhere, you're not back. And everybody's looking around saying, where's Leon? Leon was supposed to be here. I saw him coming in this morning. Is he signed out? No, he's not signed out. He's not here. He's not at the muster point. He must still be in the building. And then people have to risk their lives going in to look for you because you never bothered to sign out. Now, the problem can often be that, let's say we have a situation where it's a public building and you don't have people sign in or sign out, and you never really know how many people are there at any one time. Well, then that's the job for your fire marshals. Your fire marshals have a special case. And what they have to do is to sweep the building, to check the building. Each fire marshal will be allocated an area of that building, and they're supposed to be the last one out of that building. Then that's fine. Get everybody in front of you. You never go past the fire marshal when he's evacuating a building. He will drive everybody out so he knows, I've left that area. It is clear. Nobody's behind me. And if the plan's done well, everybody will drive everybody out, and then they'll be clear. Okay, so A safe muster point. What actually is a safe muster point? Well, you don't want it too close to the building, because let's say the building has a wall that's 30 foot high and it collapses. And you're going to get all the rubble going flying as well. So your muster point has to be at least 100 feet or so away. And are you going to have people go across a busy road? Who's going to stop the traffic? So you need to think about that. What's your route? If is it a fire that you're evacuating from, or is it a bomb you're evacuating from? If it's a bomb, you have to be double the distance at least. So plan those things out well in advance. It's too late when it starts to start thinking about it. Consider some other special cases. What about disabled staff or visitors? Will you have actually a buddy system? I'm able-bodied. I buddy with somebody who's disabled in some way or another. Maybe they have mobility problems. That's a big issue, mobility problems in this situation. So my job is to actually help them and help escort them off. Visitors, what about visitors don't speak your language? So maybe you need signs that are multilingual, or, you know, that's why a lot of the signs are, they used to have signs which said exit, which was all very well if you knew what exit meant. And exit's in the kind of an English word. So what would you say for the Frenchman? Leon will tell me, but maybe there's Germans out there. What would you say for that? What would you say for all the different languages in the world? What about in Chinese? Whereas if you have a little arrow like that and a running man, then it's pretty clear, that's what I want to do. I want to be going in that direction. So let's move on again. So what's the key elements of an emergency plan? Most people will have an emergency plan. You need to figure out who does what. What's done first and how is it done? And how do you involve the emergency services? That's basically a fire plan. Now you'll have other interesting information in it. And for example, a very basic fire plan that most of you will be familiar with. And in fact, my wife and I will be seeing one of these on Tuesday night, because I'm flying from Ireland into London to meet her. She's flying from Lagos via Casablanca to Heathrow to London to meet me. We're not going to, she'll be getting in quite late. She'll have traveled all the way from Africa to the UK. So we're not going to start flying back to Northern Ireland at that stage. We'll stay overnight in a hotel at Heathrow. And the next time you're staying in a hotel, and I already know what I'm going to find when I go into that hotel room and I look for it, I already know, because it wouldn't be legal if it wasn't there. In fact, I would ring up the fire brigade and the hotel would be shut immediately. Every room, every guest room will have a fire plan, a fire exit. They'll have a little map. Here's our floor plan, and here's a little arrow going that way, or an alternative that way. Because you're in the hotel, you've maybe just checked in 5 minutes ago, you've not stayed at this hotel before, you don't know the best way around the place. If it's a really big hotel, some people even, how do I find the dining room? How do I find the bar? Where's the gym? Where's this? You can even get a bit lost. You can afford to do that when you're relaxing on holidays. I've all evening to find the dining room. Well, I'll just use my nose and find it. Being an Irishman, I'll find the bar. I'll always find the bar. That's not a problem. They always used to say, you know, John's an Irishman. If he was on a plane and you dropped him in the middle of the Sahara Desert, within 5 minutes he'd have found a bar. And I can tell you how many naira, I used to be able to tell you how many naira was a bottle of Gulder in every single bar in VI. So I know my way around. You may not know your way around the hotel. So that's why that fire plan at the back of your door is crucial. So your fire marshal has a very important role to play, and you have to train your staff to be a fire marshal. And usually there's more than one. What happens if there's a fire and your fire marshal is off on holidays? It's their day off, it's whatever. So they would have a number of duties, and they would have checking the building is clear when it's evacuated. So they will control the evacuation so that when the fire marshals are the last people out of the building, they know there's nobody in the building. They'll check that all personnel and visitors are accounted for where that's possible. The fire marshals will be responsible for regular testing of the alarms and the emergency lighting. They will, along with your security, ensure that fire exits are kept clear at all times. And if it's the fire marshal finds it and not security, they will immediately call security. Somebody has parked a car there, we need that car removed. If they remove it immediately, fine. If they don't remove it immediately, get a tow truck and drag it away. And then if they have to pay to get their car back, that's fine. They shouldn't have parked there in the first place. They'll do fire inspections and risk assessments. They'll summon the emergency services. They'll probably know a bit of basic first aid. That's very useful in an emergency. And then think, what would be useful whenever the emergency services actually arrive? Maybe a plan of the building. They know what is where. Maybe the ventilation layout. That would be crucial because they're going to know those are routes for the fire to spread through the building, certainly routes for smoke to spread. They know about basic access to water and availability of water. Do you have any dry risers anywhere? Do you have any wet risers? Where are they going to get water from? Where are they going to get all of this? And a lot of people keep that in a big file, and they keep that file at the reception desk. And whoever's in charge of the desk at the time will take that out of the building with them. And when the emergency service arrives, they present them with the file. That's your building plans. That's where all the electric is. It's all your facilities. All your utilities are on that plan. So that's fine. You'll now know what you need to do. Okay, so we produce a document called the fire plan. It contains escape routes, exits, fire doors, fire refuges. There's an example of our little one of the bedrooms or the dining room or wherever it is in the hotel, and there's all the little arrows showing how you're going to get in or out. The fire plan will contain the locations of signs and notices. If anybody moves it or tampers with it, or God forbid turns it round to point the other way, you're going to know what it is. Locations of alarms, detectors and call points so they can be tested. Locations and types of firefighting equipment and emergency lighting. All of this will be on your fire plan. Of course, if you don't test the system, it might or might not work. And you don't want a fire to happen on an untested system, and then you find out, oh, there's a flaw in the system, something's not working. Well, it's not much use to you then. So how can you be sure your system and infrastructure function as intended when you have something going wrong? So you have to check all of these things. You have to do it regularly. You have to keep a log. Yes, that was tested 1 week ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever it is. You also have to have evacuations and drills. Do your staff know what to do? Have they practiced it? You need inspections for obstructions and presence of equipment, the presence of equipment. You should try that out and see. And I always wonder, have you ever done an evacuation? And people say, yes, we have. Say, how long did it take? What's your target? It's all very well to do the evacuation, but some people think, oh, this is just a regular test. You know, look, I've got an important email here. Look, I'll be along in a minute. Yes, you go ahead. I'm just going to finish this email. And then I come out 5 minutes later and, wow, oh yeah, it took us over 5 minutes. It took us about 7 or 8 minutes to do that evacuation. Why? John didn't come out. John was the last one out. Oh, well, sorry. So You know, so people need to, so which is more important, my email or knowing how long it takes to evacuate? You know, I can always come back and finish the email later. Yes, I have had many urgent emails in my life, but they don't all have to be answered immediately. In fact, if a building's on fire, you know, it can wait. So at the test, you treat that test as if it's the real thing, and the people evacuate properly. Now, a couple of little questions just to ask you. I'll not ask you to call in and answer them, but ask yourself these questions and answer them absolutely truthfully. Your organization, when was the last time it actually had a fire alarm test? Some of you may be answering, oh, I do that regular every week. Great. I'm very happy for you. And I'm glad, and that's, I wish you, all of you could do that. But there will be some people out there, and maybe once a year is not enough. When was the last time you had a planned evacuation? An unplanned evacuation, where you just ask permission off the big Ogga. Sometime this week I want to call an unplanned. And he'll say, well, call it any day except Wednesday afternoon, because we have a special meeting with our customers or something, but any other day is fine. Any fire-related inspection, be it your own inspection, be it an external inspector coming in, whatever. When have you had a false alarm? When have you had any sort of real fire? When's the last time you had a fire door blocked? You went along and there was something blocking it. When did some idiot, and that's a nice word, I would call them something a little bit nastier. When did you have an idiot set off by stupidity a fire extinguisher? Some people play with them. Oh, I'm gonna squirt you with it. It's not a toy. You're not 6 years of age. That's there for a specific reason. That's there hopefully to save lives. Maybe save the building as well, but primarily to save lives. So people who mess with them, I fire them on the spot. Major disciplinary offence. And just think about, well, yes, okay, we do all that. Yeah, we're okay, we do all that. Yeah, you're okay, you do all that. What do you think the consequences might be if you didn't do it all? So how long did your last evacuation actually take? And what was the target time? Was the actual time acceptable? So, like everything in health and safety, the most important thing is a risk assessment. If you get everything in your health and safety system absolutely correct, except your risk assessments, they're wrong. And another company gets their risk assessments correct and everything else they get wrong, they've got a safer system than you. Risk assessments are so key. And in fact, if your risk assessments are wrong, everything's wrong. No matter how good it is in theory, everything will be wrong. So the key thing is those risk assessments. So let's think about what we do. First of all, like all risk assessment, remember, you look at a hazard. I hope by now you all know the difference between a hazard and a risk. So you identify and record any fire hazards. And when I say record, if it ain't written down, you didn't do it. So you've got to do that. Identify and record locations and persons who may be at risk. Evaluate and record the risks. Are they low risk, medium risk, high risk? Are they acceptable? I mean, you can never be totally risk-free. There's no such thing as being 100% risk-free. We're all going to die sooner or later. Sad to say. I'm sitting here in my home in Ireland. Maybe there could be a gas leak and an explosion somewhere. Maybe a plane could fall out of the sky on me, even though I'm not beneath any flight plan. Somebody could be off course, and a plane could land on you. There's a million and one things can happen that you can never be. You know, there's no point in saying I'm going to stay at home and then nothing will ever happen to me and I live forever. You know, it's not going to happen. So you have to accept some level of risk. And you have to decide what is that level of risk. and it's different for a lot of different situations. You then prepare, record, and execute an action plan to reduce the risks as low as is practicable. So you look at, and remember, we say risk assessment is what's called an iterative process. You keep going around it. So we go around it and we say, yes, okay, we've looked at all these risks. Here's a few that are a bit too high. I'm sorry, we just can't accept them. What are we going to do? Well, like everybody else, we put in an action plan to reduce the risk. But you don't just say, right, I've done that. We now redo the risk assessment. And hopefully, if your action plan's correct, the risk will have come down. Is it low enough, or is it still too high? It could still be too high. So then you do more action, you reduce it further, and you keep going round until the end result of that process of iteration of keep going round, repeat, 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 repeat. The end result of it is when it's low enough for you to accept. And then the fifth thing, monitor and review this at least annually. But really, you should not wait for it to be annual if you have a change. A change can change the conditions. And even if you're doing just a very quick look to say, does this affect anything? And you're actually sure it doesn't. At least then you know, yeah, we didn't change anything important there, so the risk is still okay. But sometimes you might find, well, I didn't think this was important, but then somebody pointed out that it actually does have consequences, and that does increase the risk. So we have to do something about that. So that's our fire risk assessments. For part one, be sure to identify and record combustible materials, identify and record sources of heat and ignition, identify and record unsafe acts and unsafe conditions. Unsafe acts, things that you do. Unsafe conditions, oh, there's something over there, it shouldn't be over there. For example, if you have a stairwell and people are using it for storage of materials. Stairwells are not that. Storage rooms are for storage of materials, not stairwells. Think about your risk assessment then. What might be a good action plan? Well, there's one, reduction of rubbish. That's a very good one. It's hygienic. It takes away a lot of rubbish. It makes the place look better. It can stop slips, trips, and falls. In fact, good housekeeping is one of the best ways of addressing slips, trips, and falls. But also, it would have prevented that Bradford Stadium football fire, our second video. That was because they let rubbish accumulate. And that was also the London Underground fire, another exact same cause. Relocate your stored materials. Do you really need to keep petrol in that area, or should we not be keeping it well away? Minimize the amount of flammable material. You know, you bring in something that'll last you for 5 years before you have to get more of it. Why don't you just bring in a little bit of it at a time? Provision of metal storage cabinets for certain chemicals, so sparks can't get near them. So there's lots of good risk assessments like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish my slides here, and then we're going to see if okay, and back to me there. So that's it. Let's see if anybody else has anything that they want to do or ask.
Permit me, before we can open up question, permit me to thank you very much for time invested and the quality of your presentation. For those who were not here at the beginning, I said that this is our gift. I mean, the training team, this is our gift to you since we are in the midterm break today. In fact, this is the first week of our training, and we have no one better to offer you in nature than John. I believe that you really appreciate his teaching method and the lesson is learned. Thank you very much once again, John. And if you like, let us give you a round of applause for a wonderful job done. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you. Now we
OSHA Dalu Nagode.
Yeah, you deserve. You know, we learn a lot of things here. So if you have a question, kindly raise up your hand. Yeah, let's start from with Mr. Mazu. Mr. Mazu, kindly unmute yourself. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, really, actually, it has been a quite an interesting presentation, and we really appreciate the share of experience. Actually, it was a gift at the college, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, you are
No
welcome.
problem. My pleasure.
Appreciation. Thank you very much. Mr. Adeleke Sherif. Mr. Adeleke.
Allow me here for this opportunity. My question goes like this: like, according to the lecture that we have,
Please, can you kindly raise up your voice a bit?
can you hear me?
I'm a little bit deaf, as you can see.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, please, go on.
Okay, like according to the lecture that we actually received, when we have a fire outbreak, there are processing that we need to follow, like relocating where the fire is coming from, the causes of the fire, and like reporting the fire, raising an alarm about the fire outbreak. But what happened in a situation where maybe where you are sleeping, you were filled up with smoke. One, you could not know the causes of the fire, to know the type of what was it called, the instrument or the equipment to use to quench the fire. Then secondly, we talk about temperature. The other time, like you have 17 degree over there, and here we have like 30, 34 degree. Can actually affect the, as in when fire outbreak comes up. This actually in an area where we have an hot weather, it increase the level of the fire, like it increase the level of the fire down to area that we have a cooler temperature rather. So can we specify the kind of what's it called, the extinguisher to be used in that area?
Okay, well, a couple of very good points, sir. The first point where you're talking about what happens when you're asleep and the fire starts, this emphasizes really importantly, really brings how crucial it is that you test those systems, because there's going to be automatic systems in place there, hopefully, that will allow you to identify that fire, that should wake you up. Because what you don't want is some people, a fire starts in their house and they're actually killed in their bed, and they're killed not by the fire, they're killed by smoke inhalation. The fire brigade realize there's a fire, the neighbors maybe see it, they alert the fire brigade comes, puts out the fire, they go up, they enter the bedroom, which the fire hasn't touched, and they find the person smothered, choked to death in bed because of the smoke. So that's why when you get to a certain age, I told you I'm an old man, even though my beautiful little Nigel wife's only 32, I'm 66. So what you have is you have all the old people in the country. The fire brigade in this country will come and give them free a fire alarm. It will fit it for them and tell them how they will come. Here we are, we're going to fit this for you. And all the old people in the country get that here. So that's one of the things that they do. So keeping those systems working is very, very good. Now, you've mentioned about the weather, and we can see this happening, for example, just, well, it was the day before yesterday, I was up in Belfast and I was meeting a friend of mine just for a drink. And I got there first and I was watching the TV, and they were talking about big fires in England. And there are more fires now because of the weather drying out the place. And it's very, very warm in England at the minute, much warmer than Ireland at the minute. So that is it. In the United States, what their problem is that they have some areas where there are lots of forests. And remember, Nigerian forest, a lot of the wood is kind of damp and wet. Doesn't really catch fire that easily. Some of the forests in America are quite dry. And once a fire gets hold there, it's a nightmare trying to stop them. So they will actually take special measures. They will have people on hand. They will keep, people will not be allowed to take their holidays, so they'll have reserve teams ready to go and all kinds of things like that. So preparations under dry weather can be increased dramatically. But the ultimate, the end result and the ultimate answer to the question has to be that every country in the world has its own culture, its own climate, its own systems for dealing with things, its own resources for dealing with things, and they have to work out for themselves the best way of doing something. So I've given you a lot of very general principles. I know how they're applied in the UK. I know how they're applied in much of Europe. I know how they're applied in many of the 26 countries I've worked in my life, including Nigeria. But there will be other countries out there, and they do things very strangely. Switzerland. In Switzerland, they did not keep, remember I said a fire extinguisher was meant to protect a fire exit? That's why they should always be on the wall at a certain height, visible beside a fire door. They weren't in Switzerland, but yet they had their own rationale and their fire authorities were okay with it. So you just have to adapt those things, but have a plan in advance, think about it in advance, and do what basically the authorities in the country have decided, or whatever your organization has decided. Don't wait until the fire starts to start working it out. It's much too late then.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Before we call on Mr. Okoli, let's abide to formality. We know that it's 8 o'clock, but I will stop the recording. Usually on Friday, we go for extra time because of the quality of the instruction and the input we're gonna have. So permit me to stop the recording. Once the recording